Now that we have a Bolt.new project, what's next? We need to create a GitHub repository for our project. To do that without leaving our browser, we can open this Bolt.new project in StackBlitz. You can see here there's an Open in StackBlitz button. Let's click on that. It will install the needed dependencies or packages and run it automatically, as you can see here. So it still works as before. To enable version control, we'll need a new GitHub repository. We can do that directly here in StackBlitz. You can see there's a button here, create a repository. Let's click on that. And we can see that GitHub app configuration is required. Since I haven't connected my StackBlitz account with my GitHub account, this is required. So let's do that. Let's click on configure app. We will be asked to install and authorize StackBlitz. Right now, all repositories is selected by default. We can change this later for our security. So for now, let's click on install and authorize. Now that we have authorized GitHub, we can close this and update the status. So now we can see that StackBlitz app is installed in GitHub. So let's click proceed. Now we are asked to name our new repository. I will name this Moodflip app. I will not check this button to make this repository public, so you can view it by yourselves later on. Let's now click create a repository. This is normal, so you can just click on leave. With our GitHub repository ready, let's set up continuous deployment on Netlify. In order to do that, we can log into netlify.com. This is also free, so I can sign up with GitHub. Since I'm already signed in to my GitHub account, it will go straight to this authorized Netlify auth. So we can click authorize Netlify. Netlify will ask some questions. Let's continue to deploy. Now we will be asked to deploy our first project. Since this is the next step that we need to do, we can click on GitHub repo. Let's authorize Netlify. And then here, we can select the new repository that we created earlier. So click on only select repositories and click on this repository. And then click install. Then we can click on the Moodflip app here. So now we can deploy our project. But if we do this right now, it will not work because the publishing folder is set to public, and that's not the directory that we want. In order to find out which directory or publishing directory we can use in Netlify, we can go back to StackBlitz. We can run here npm run build. And it should create a new directory. Usually it's this. There you go. So this. So going back to Netlify, clicking this will not work. So we need to edit build settings. So this is correct. This is the GitHub branch to deploy. We can leave base directory as is. This is the correct build command. And in the publish directory, we need to change it to this. We can leave the rest as is. And then we can click on deploy Moodflip app to Netlify. So now the deployment is in progress. So now it's initializing, deploy success. So let's click on get started. So how can we preview the site? We can click on this first and then click on the deployed URL here. As we can see, we were able to deploy our repository to Netlify and our app still works. You might notice that the URL is not that memorable. This URL does not represent our ownership of the app. So what's the solution? We need to use a custom domain. To do that, let's go back to Netlify, click on Domain Management, and then click on Add Domain. Here we are asked to provide a custom domain or subdomain. We can buy a new domain in Netlify or buy it somewhere else like Namecheap or some other domain registrar. I already have a domain called AI-drivencoder.com. So what I will do is I will create a new subdomain for this project. We need to configure our DNS settings depending on your domain provider. In my case, I'm using AWS Route 53. So let me go to AWS Route 53. I will use moodflip.ai-drivencoder.com. Let's go back to Netlify. Let's click on verify. AI-drivencoder.com is already registered, so we can click on add subdomain. Let's click on awaiting external DNS, and then it says here that we need to create a new CNAME record. Copy the CNAME value and go to AWS Route 53. Make sure the record type is CNAME and paste in the value we copied earlier. And then let's try to refresh. So it's now checking the status and that message disappeared. That means we can open the app using the subdomain that we have created. Let's try that. As you can see, we were able to open the app using the subdomain we created. But notice that the site says it's not secure. That's because we don't have the SSL certificate yet. Let's go to AWS and search for Certificate Manager. There it is. Let's click on that. Let's request a certificate. Let's click on Next to request a public certificate. For the fully qualified domain name, let's type in our subdomain. And then let's leave the default options selected. It's now pending validation. So there's a domain section here. Let's create records in Route 53. It's still pending validation. Maybe it's still waiting for the propagation. So this is normal usually when we're dealing with DNS. Let's try to refresh and the status is still the same, pending validation. Now the status is issued. So let's see if we can refresh and have a secure site. There you go. We have successfully deployed the app using a custom subdomain in Netlify. So now let's focus on updating or making changes to our project. If we take a look at our project, we have a lot of room for improvement. But let's make a simple change using StackBlitz. Let's change the title to something else. So in order to do that, we can go to index.html and let's change this and then save. Of course, this will not change automatically because we need to push our changes to GitHub first. To do that, let's go to source control. Let's click on stage all changes and then let's add a message for our commit. Let's just simply say update page title. Then click on commit and push. Now our change has been committed and pushed to GitHub. Netlify will automatically detect that change and deploy this app automatically. So now if we go to deploys, we can see that the update page title commit causes a new deployment. We can click on this to see the details as before. So now it's complete. We can now go to our app and refresh. And as you can see, the title has been updated. Let's recap the steps we took. We created a new project in Bolt.new, opened the project in StackBlitz, and created a new GitHub repository. We set up a continuous deployment in Netlify, set up an SSL using AWS Certificate Manager. We made changes to StackBlitz and pushed those changes in GitHub, which triggers the deployment in Netlify. Thanks for watching and happy coding!